I actually performed with this ensemble at the University of Hawaii for one semester when I was in my doctoral program. And it looks like they're inside a room. And it's a very cool setup down there because they have a sliding glass wall with panels, glass panels that slide into slots in the wall on either side. And then what you see in the very front is concrete from a courtyard, an outdoor courtyard. So this is a room that they can rehearse in, and they're indoors, but they perform in that outdoor context. Now, you heard how the bronze idiophones were predominant texture in there. Hopefully you heard the different gongs creating the sense of the rhythmic cycle. And I should mention that the colotomic cycle is usually 16 beats or 32 beats or pulses long, and the lowest or deepest sounding gong, the largest one, will play at the beginning of each of those cycles. Let's say it's a 16 pulse cycle. Play on beat 1, if you will. Now, it gets very tricky because the people from Indonesia that are taking this course might be aware that they actually play in the Indonesian way of thinking on the last beat, beat 16. But to the Western mind, it gets processed as what we call a downbeat or beat 1. Then you have maybe a medium-sized gong that is striking every 8 pulses. So in the Western way of thinking, it's pulse 1 and pulse 9. And then a slightly smaller gong that might be playing every 4 pulses, or pulse number 1, 5, 9, 13. And they divide up the rhythmic cycle for the performers and the listener to kind of organize the performance. The other thing you might have noticed in this excerpt, if you watched 3 minutes, is that over on the extreme right-hand side, in the back, you see someone with a notebook folder, and you hear this faint singing, female singing, and that person is rendering that performance. I told you that outdoor playing is atypical to have vocal, but here is a case where they do have a vocal involved with the outdoor or loud playing style. Now, as you might expect, the counterpoint to that is the soft playing style, usually indoors. And chordophones and aerophones are more emphasized. Sometimes there are idiophones, sometimes they're very much in the mix, but more often it's the chordophones and aerophones that are emphasized, and often with vocal in this context. And I do have an excerpt of that style of performance as well. Again, first 3 minutes in this excerpt will give you an idea of how this contrasts with the outdoor playing.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, on first impression, we might be tempted to look at this ethnocentrically as an outsider and attempt to put labels on this like hypnotic, entrancing. And then we might catch ourselves and maybe mentally chastise ourselves for being ethnocentric. But it just might be in this case. That's an accurate way to think of it because the Indonesian aesthetic here is to create that kind of trance-like state, that meditative state with this kind of music. So in this presentation, Lesson 10.1, we've laid the groundwork, we've laid the foundation, and we've looked at traditional music in Indonesia. And as often we do in this class, we'll follow that up with another presentation that takes you and connects the past, the tradition, with the current mix of contemporary global culture, popular culture, and traditional culture. So let's summarize this part one, this foundation, to recognize that there's great cultural diversity in Indonesia in the 21st century, to understand a little bit about how that transpired through different migrations, different influxes of religious influence, colonial influence, and of course the diversity of the island groups and the populations of those island groups themselves. We need to remember that the ensembles are dominated by bronze idiphones, and that constitutes a distinctive part of Indonesia's musical culture. Gamelan music is the prime example of that. And as you think back upon our other cultures that we've studied, have we encountered a culture that's using bronze to create their instruments in this way? I don't think we have. We've had people in subtropical and tropical climates using bamboo, using other kinds of subtropical and tropical trees to create, to use membrane from fish, from sharks, from other animals to create their membranophones. But here, we have a culture using bronze extensively. And even if you look at Africa and how they created these melodic instruments, these idiophones, out of wood rather than through the process of metallurgy. But here in Southeast Asia, island Southeast Asia, we have the process of metallurgy of creating these metal melodic instruments, idiophones. The only other place that it's this predominant is continental Southeast Asia. We may have some Cambodian students who are members of this class, and you are familiar with the Cambodian version of these bronze idiophones and their sound, and other places in continental Southeast Asia. But this region seems to be unique in the way that predominated in pre-contact times. Within that, we have the layering of melodic and rhythmic elements as a very important part of traditional and popular music, as you're going to see in the next lesson. That aesthetic carries over into Indonesian popular music. The Slendro and Pelag scales are the two primary scales that were used in traditional Javanese and Balinese music. And remember the commonalities and the contrasts in Java and Bali. What's the same about those cultures and the way they used the bronze idiophones and other instruments in the ensemble? What are some of the differences in the way they used those, especially Bali using pairs of instruments slightly detuned intentionally to create a special effect? And then remember the differences between the loud playing style and the soft playing style.